To welcome to the stage Josh. Just brief description. Josh has worked in the pro-life movement since he was 18. That's some of you, right? After 12 years of full-time pro-life work, he launched Equal Rights Institute to maximize his impact on the movement. A sought-after speaker, Josh has spoken for more than 23,000 people in 6 countries, in 25 of the 50 states. Josh's primary passion is helping pro-life people to be more persuasive when they communicate with pro-choice people. That means ditching the faulty rhetoric and tactics and embracing arguments that hold up under philosophical scrutiny. It has frozen. The rest of his thing has frozen. So he has publicly debated leaders from a variety of places, and I will be able to tell you the rest of it at the end. I'm so sorry, it's frozen. But let's welcome Josh to the stage. Can you practice and see?
We're going to see if this works.
Yeah.
This seems to work.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got this. We've got this. We're going to see if this mic works. We've got check, check, check. Can you hear me? You've got this? Okay. So it's great to be here. Sorry, this is like the most awkward way to start a speech like I think we've ever done, but that's okay. We're okay. I was in the Denver airport several years ago on a layover. I was on my way home. It was just like one of those things where I've got like a half an hour. I grabbed a sandwich. I like ran to my gate. I'm going to sit at my gate. I'm going to eat my sandwich and probably watch like the next episode of Lost and just kind of get on my flight. And as I kind of sit down and get my stuff out, a businesswoman in her late 30s across from me asked me the question that I've spent my entire career hating. What do you do for a living? It's like, oh. It's like, assuming she's pro-choice, how am I supposed to respond to that question? Like, how could I possibly answer that question in a way that wouldn't just get this started off on the wrong foot? It kind of feels like maybe I should be over here. I'm going to do this until they figure this out. Scott, yeah, I'm going to give you that. Like, you can work on that. I got this. It's fine. It's a live stream. It never goes well, right? Like this is the rule. So she asked me, what do I do for a living? And I was like, I don't know how to respond to that question. I've never known how to respond to that question in a way that's not going to get this started off on the wrong foot. So I answered her that day in a way that I never had before, which has now become my go-to response. So she said, what do you do for a living? I said, I try to help pro-life people to be less weird. And she smiled a little bit. So it had already worked better than anything else I'd ever tried. And she said, what does that mean? And I said, I'm trying to help pro-life people to use more good arguments and fewer bad ones. But more importantly, I want to help us to connect relationally with people who are different, with people who are maybe coming from a different religious background, who are perhaps coming from a different political background. I want to help us to connect. So at ERI, we have this mission statement. We train pro-life advocates how to think clearly, reason honestly, and argue persuasively. It's a very apologetics-y mission statement. But what the heart and soul is of ERI is we want to help the pro-life movement to become more like Jesus. Scott's the man. Yeah, I give Scott a round of applause. Now I can move a little bit, which is going to be nice. All right. Hopefully we don't have. Okay. I want to help the whole pro-life movement get more like Jesus. I'm fascinated by the question, what would it look like if Jesus talked to a pro-choice person about abortion? Like, what would his body language be like? What would he ask? What would he not ask? And what would it sound like when he made arguments that was like spoken and that was grounded in truth, but spoken with gentleness and grace. I want to help the whole pro-life movement to get closer to that mark. So I want to help us to live out better Colossians 4:5-6, which says, conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. Let your speech always be filled with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. I want to camp on this awesome set of verses for a few moments. And there's a few things that I think that this tells us that's really cool. One is opportunities. Every time you get to interact with a pro-choice person, that is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to either pull this person closer to the pro-life position, or it's an opportunity to push them further away from the pro-life position. It's probably not going to stay static. It's going to be one or the other, but these are opportunities in front of us and opportunities that we got to prepare ourselves for. You should be ready to have these conversations. You should train up. You should study pro-life apologetics, learn about the arguments that are working better than others and the dialogue tips so that you are ready for those conversations. I also love this idea about seasoning with salt. So I didn't used to be able to bake at all. Like I could make bacon. That was pretty much the end of it. Like if I was really feeling pretty confident, I might have thrown together chocolate chip cookie dough, maybe. But like it wasn't, and at some point it's like I should get healthier. And so I'm going to start making more food. So like, now I'm the dad sometimes in the kitchen after work with the iPad on the counter, like open to Pinterest, and I'm surrounded with ingredients, and I'm desperately trying to make my food look like their food. Like the people on Pinterest who take these like glamour shots of their, like, who are these people? Anyway, so like I'm just in there trying to like make food work, and it's been a process. But throughout that process, as I've tried a lot more recipes, I've come to have a lot greater appreciation for a certain part of the grocery store. Some of you are ahead of me just because you're smart, like you figured this out. The seasoning section. Oh man, where all the seasoning is? I'm telling you, if you get to make food for people, and you should make food for people. And when you get to do that, their experience can be made or broken on what you do with the stuff from the seasoning section. Like that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's kind of true also. Like when you season your food with salt, that makes it better. Like that means that people should enjoy these conversations. Like I went to England to do some speaking like a year or two ago, and I'm sorry, I don't know if any of you are from England. I hope not. I don't want to offend anyone. I'm just saying like it was kind of rough. The food, it was like really bad. Like everywhere was bad and there's historical reasons. I looked it up. Like World War II happened and they didn't have supplies. Like they got used to not using like any salt. I had a bad steak. I didn't know that was possible. It was terrible. It's like they boiled it or something. I don't know. But like, have you had the new Chick-fil-A fries? Anyone had this is a controversial subject, but Chick-fil-A changed the recipe. We had it for the first time yesterday. They changed, it's a little different. It's a little bit less seasoned. It's a little bit less like a Chick-fil-A fry. Seasoning makes a difference. And that means that the people that we have conversations with should enjoy these conversations. And what is salt being compared to? Grace. That means that our conversations should be infused with grace. And finally, this idea, you will know how you should respond to each person. That implies what? That implies that we should respond differently to different people. That means that evangelism done well is more complicated than memorizing John 3:16 and some other gospel verses. And like, if you really want to, you study apologetics, you can learn William Lane Craig's arguments for God's existence. Like you can go all hard mode and that will be really helpful for some people. There are some other people where that would just push them away because they're hurting And maybe they just need someone who loves Jesus to love on them first and hear them. Like, people are complicated, messy creatures. When I'm in a conversation with someone, my goal is not necessarily to get them to be pro-life. And it's not necessarily to get them on their knees in humility before the cross. I've had some people say that I should try to talk about, some form of Christian apologetics in every conversation that I have. I've also had other people tell me that I should never, ever talk about anything like that in any conversation that I have. So, I think neither are true. My goal in a conversation is to love this person. How can I love this person as well as I can right now? Like, how can I love this person optimally? What does she need now? And what she needs today might be different than what she needed yesterday. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Our motto at ERI is every conversation is a series of difficult judgment calls amidst prayer without ceasing. I'll say that again. Every conversation is a series of difficult judgment calls amidst prayer without ceasing. I don't always make the right calls, but I certainly don't run all my conversations from the same script. Can we stop treating people like formulas for a second and remember that they're people and that people are complicated? So sometimes I'm in a conversation and I feel like what this person needs most from me is a good pro-life argument. I'm happy to oblige. There are other times that I think that this person needs to hear the way that I think about God's existence or something like that. There are other times that it just seems like they just need someone to hear them, to love them. I was doing an outreach at Pasadena City College with Justice for All at one time. It's one of my favorite groups. They do awesome training and campus outreaches. And on this particular morning, I was standing in front of their 18-foot tall exhibit that graphically shows the reality of abortion, and it's pretty intense. And so that's the kind of so I ended up talking to someone who I could hear yelling at me from the other side of the quad before she got to me. So like the volume was going up as he's yelling and storming at me, and she was really, really upset. And she just chewed me out for a while. She just like vented. And I'm listening, and she's making some kind of like not very good pro-choice arguments, but I'm not really jumping in. I'm just listening. I could tell that she just needed someone to listen to her. And eventually, as she can tell from my body language that I care about it, like there's a picture that someone took of this conversation, and I look really sad. I probably look like that the entire conversation. It was a sad conversation because as she could tell that I was sympathizing with her, then she starts sharing about how her stepfather abused her as a teenager. And I'm like, oh my goodness, of course. She's going to have really complicated feelings about men, not to mention pro-lifers, and I'm both. And so like it kind of makes some sense that, and who knows what else was going on in her life. But at this point, she's calmed down, and now we're having a better conversation. And I jumped in a couple of times. I made a few pro-life arguments. There was one time when she was like, "All you pro-lifers want to kill abortion doctors," and I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. I need you to understand we're pro-life. We don't do that." I made like probably one pro-life argument at some point in there, but like generally speaking, I just heard her. I just listened. And towards the end of the conversation, it's like 20 or 30 minutes. This guy walks up selling chocolate bars, just like in Pasadena, it's summer in Southern California. And he's just like, "Hey, do you want to buy these chocolate bars?" And I was like, "No, thanks." And I think she thought I was being cheap. And so Sarah's like, "Do you want me to buy you one?" And I was being cheap. That was probably true, but it's like, I also don't want chocolate on a summer day. Anyway, so anyway, but that would not imagine an alternative universe where she stormed up to me yelling and wants to get into the thing. And if I had a different attitude that was kind of like, "Yeah, come on, let's do this." I'm like, I can't wait for you to, like that kind of thing. Like, you know, those people that are like, I can't wait for the next pro poor idiot to like show up. I'm going to ram them with all the arguments that I learned at this conference. Like, you know, those people, don't be that person. Anyway, I'm here to talk about relational apologetics. Oh, I went too far. So when I say relational apologetics, I mean the practice of cultivating relationships with people who have different beliefs from yours for the sake of genuine friendship and for discovering truth together. I started thinking about this about 12-ish years ago when I ended up in this secret abortion debate Facebook group. And when I say secret, I just mean like that's that thing that Facebook classifies it where you can't find it, you can't search for it, like you have to be invited in. It's like the dark web of Facebook or something like that kind of thing. So I didn't start this, but someone started this and invited me in kind of early. And it was just like this little tight group of like roughly like, let's say like a half dozen active pro-choice people and a half dozen active pro-life people that were just here for a long period of time to debate about abortion. And I agreed to do it and ended up spending like an hour a day for a while, like engaging with these people, because in the beginning, I saw it as a potentially interesting sociological experiment. Because up until that point, I had never spent more than about 2 hours with a pro-choice person. Like when we have an outreach, when we do a campus outreach, my conversations are longer than like average. Like I think a lot of the great stuff happens after the 30-minute mark. So you'll sometimes find me sitting under a tree with a pro-choice person for like a long time. But even still, after we leave campus, I'm probably not going to see that person again. Here, I was like, I get to know Jessica and Ronnie and Kara and Kira. Like these are actual people. And I can try to like maybe get to know like how do they respond to different kinds of pro-lifers? How do they respond to different kinds of pro-life arguments? Like that maybe that can tell me something interesting, something worth devoting a lot of time to. I was less busy then. So, but I was like, so I'm gonna like devote a lot of time to this. And it was good. And I did learn a lot from that. We went for about a year. And it was fascinating. And we became friends. Like we became like kind of like we cared about each other, but we also talked about this for a long time. But after about a year, it got too big and it imploded. It turns out that there's like an optimal size for these things, and it's I don't know what that is, but it's like probably fewer than 20. And at some point, we let it get to like 90. I know it was not going to work out. So like we just dismantled it. It kind of just wasn't the special thing that it was for like a year anymore. So we dismantled it. And so it got me thinking a lot about like just most people are not going to change their mind in one day about something. Like that happens. Sorry, I hit the clicker again. Put that there. Like that happens. When we do like a college outreach, that probably happens once or twice on average, as someone will go from like a pro-choice position to a pro-life position. But like that's the exception, not the rule. You should not expect that in most of your conversations. Like the stars kind of have to align for that to happen. I need to be talking to an open-minded person who probably does not have like a personal experience with abortion. They need to be talking to a reasonable, nice pro-life person who's making the kinds of arguments that can help them, you know, help take care of those arguments, basically. Like I think that's basically what they need. So I'm thinking about how most people are going to change their mind, not in one day like that. They're going to change their mind over a long period of time. You would change your mind, generally speaking, not in one day, but over a long period of time. And so that just seems normal. So I'm thinking about that. And and now having spent the last 10 years thinking about it, I want to share with you a few stories that I hope will kind of paint a beautiful picture of what this can look like in the real world. And I'm going to make a couple of arguments for why I think that you should do this, just to put my cards on the table, that I'm here to persuade you about something, and so I'm going to go for that. And then I'm going to offer you 7 practical tips for how to do this well. I have so much to learn about this. I am not an expert. I am someone who has tried this, who has spent a lot of time doing it and thinking about it, but I have so much more to learn. But I have learned some things that I would love to share with you because this is hard. It is hard to be friends with people who look and think differently than you. It's easy to be friends with people who look just like you and think just like you. This is hard. So I'm going to offer you some tips on how to do this. Let me finally tell you about Deanna. Deanna emailed me shortly after that Facebook group imploded. It was like perfect timing. And she emails me basically an essay. She had seen some video podcasts that I had made on bodily autonomy arguments. Some of my colleagues at Justice for All, including there, and Trent Horn and some other kind of pro-life philosophy, we were all thinking a lot about bodily autonomy arguments for a couple of years, thinking about kind of novel approaches to it. So I had done some video podcasts talking about that. She had seen it. She had a pro-choice blog, like really smart pro-choice blog. So she had seen some of those, thought it was interesting, and basically was emailing me her response, like some counter arguments to some of the things that we said. And when I read this essay, I could tell a couple of things about Deanna. I could tell that she was really smart. And I could tell also that she was open-minded. So I replied, it's like, you're awesome. Like, that's exactly the kind of person I want to talk to. So I'm like, yeah, you're awesome. I would love to talk to you. So I responded to like a few of the things that she said. And we began to email back and forth. See, Deanna self-identified at the time as a pro-choice atheist lesbian in Canada. So you wouldn't think that we would have very much in common, given that she's from Canada. Just kidding. I love Canadians, they're cool. But we did have a lot in common. We have similar senses of humor. She also likes that joke. We have, we both are interested in philosophy. We both are particularly interested in the topic of abortion. Like, that was enough. And we liked each other in a not completely non-romantic way, we liked each, there's that kind of chemistry that you have to have in a friendship where you guys want to be around each other, at least to some extent, like you got to have that. So we began emailing back and forth. And it ended up being about 130 long email exchange. And by the end of that 130 emails, we were friends. And then we began to Skype. This was before Zoom took over the market. This kind of dates the story a little bit. We were using Skype. I know. And so we would talk for a few hours. And it changed the tone of the conversations in a really interesting way. You see, in the emails, I reread the emails, and like the ratio of us talking about abortion or like philosophically adjacent things to abortion was like 90-10, 90% that and like 10% like the personal normal things that friends talk about. When we began to Skype, that became 50-50. I knew that would happen. I was right. I knew. Doesn't matter. So we would Skype, and so we would talk about like a lot of things. I was there talking with her when she moved out of her parents' house. She was there kind of walking with me emotionally through the terrifying journey of launching ERI 10 years ago and fundraising for the first time, like all of that. I was there to grieve with her when her grandmother died, her first close family death after having become an atheist. And to resist the temptation to just like juke it into a Jesus conversation, which is what she was expecting me to do, what she was waiting for me to do. I didn't. Just grieved with her. Ultimately, after a year and a half of conversation, she went through a 3-week self-identity crisis because she felt like all of her pro-choice arguments had been beaten. But she was worried about what would happen if she started calling herself pro-life. You see, at the time, besides me, Deanna's friends group, they wouldn't be thrilled if she started calling herself that. That's not what her culture was, what her friend group was. And she had to wrestle with that. And she ultimately got over it. And she made herself a pro-life shirt. She got just a blank shirt and took a Sharpie to it so that she could make a shirt to wear to the Canadian March for Life. It's a little bit hard to read, so I'll read it for you. It says, I think it's human because its parents are human. It's alive because it's growing, and all humans should have an equal right to life, so it should have a right to life. What do you think? And then after the Canadian March for Life, she posted that picture on social media, and on that day, Deanna came out of the closet for the second time in her life. This time as a pro-life person. And I asked her, what happened? What did it for you, kind of a thing? And she told me about this 3 weeks of processing this kind of concern, this fear that she had. And I said, well, how did you get over that? She said, well, at one point, I finally realized that even if the worst case scenario happened, even if all of my friends ditched me, there would still be one guy on the other side of the fence who would welcome me with open arms. And that was enough. That was enough for her to begin self-identifying as pro-life. So I start telling the story, and we wrote a few articles about it. And then a really cool thing happened later. The University of Portland invited both of us to come and do an outreach together. So I got to be a part of Deanna's first outreach, campus outreach. But then we got to do this open to the public event where we got to share our story together and share a whole bunch of tips and kind of like things that kind of made this work. I want to tell you another story. I don't have a slide for it, so I'm just going to tell you another story, and then I'm going to tell yours. But I want to tell you about another one of my friends named Ronnie. Ronnie was in the Facebook debate group, and Ronnie was extremely pro-choice. But we genuinely liked each other from the beginning. Of all the people in that group, Ronnie was one of the 3 pro-choice people that I thought was like the most likely to become pro-life. She's an amazing reader. She's a good thinker, and her ultimate fantasy is being a Supreme Court justice. And Deanna would Ronnie would go through a long period, a long process of going from pro-choice to pro-life. And she would ultimately write a lot of articles about that process. So I actually get to read, I'm going to read a few things just from her words about what that process was, because I think it actually tells us some really interesting things. So this is something that Ronnie says about what it was like after having been in that secret abortion debate group for a while. She says, I started to call myself on the fence because I came to realize slowly but surely that there were many great pro-life points out there and great pro-life people, even if I didn't realize that my enemies were some of them. There were bad pro-choice arguments too, and I'm really glad that the ones who first started pointing these out to me were not the stereotypical hateful pro-lifers and extremists. I don't know what I would have done if they had been. No doubt I would have been even more resistant to change than I already was. Isn't that interesting? So I eventually got to meet her. After the debate group imploded, years later, I got to meet her in Wichita, Kansas, and hang out with her with my friend Steve Wagner from Justice for All, another apologist friend of mine, Clinton Wilcox, and we all hung out at Steve's house, and we talked about abortion. And it was awesome. And this is something that Ronnie wrote about that conversation. It was one of the important milestones in her story. She said, we all sat in the kitchen dining area, and there the real talking began. It was wonderful to be able to be heard. In most online debates, tell me if you recognize this feeling. She said, in most online debates, you speak all you want, but your arguments are seldom heard from the opposite side. And if they are, it is mostly so that the opposing side can misconstrue them. That feel familiar? Yeah. I read that sentence. For a long time, by that day, I had been mostly asking questions and lurking. Of course, I debate too, but it was mostly on the pages where, again, you weren't really heard. But here these people were, all pro-life, mind you, talking to me, asking me questions. And here's the kicker, actually listening to me. They didn't tell me I was wrong. They didn't call me a murderer. They addressed what I said, asked for clarification, and they let me ask questions, answering every single one I asked. Now this was a discussion. Their questions were sometimes difficult to answer, though. So Clinton and I took her out to Olive Garden to continue the discussion of abortion, as you do. It was great. And ultimately, she would eventually become pro-life and Eastern Orthodox. She's an Orthodox Christian. And she wrote this wonderful piece for Secular Pro-Life, and I'm just going to read one more quote from her. I just love this. She said, "As a woman, I neither need nor want the right to kill humans to be equal as a human being. I am a woman. I am strong. I am capable. I am not inferior, and I don't need the right to kill to be equal." How cool is that? It's like, oh man, okay. Now let me tell you about Megan Phelps Roper. I'm going to tell you a few stories that don't have anything to do with me. Megan Phelps Roper is just so interesting. So Megan Phelps Roper grew up in Westboro Baptist Church. That Megan Phelps Roper. Her grandfather was Fred Phelps, the infamous quote unquote pastor who ran this thing called Westboro Baptist Church. I would not call them a church or think of them as a church personally. I would think of them as a cult. It's a few families on a compound, a few generations, and they were known primarily for protesting at military funerals with really, really homophobic signs. Like most of their signs, I would not put on the screen. But their thing was they thought that when American soldiers died overseas, that was really, really good, or something to celebrate because that was God's righteous judgment against America for legalizing same-sex marriage. So that's what they would do. So that's what Megan Phelps grew up in. That's what she grew up being indoctrinated in. Her grandfather was that pastor. Now, a few of Megan's older siblings became free speech lawyers. They defend their own cases. They don't have to pay any lawyers. And they get sued a lot because they're really obnoxious and hateful. But they know exactly what the law is. And it's all, free speech, they stay within all the permits and all the things. So they win their cases and they defend their own cases. But that's not the journey that Megan went on. The journey that Megan went on was becoming their social media manager. Did you know that Westboro Baptist Church is on Twitter? Yeah, can you believe that? Like, I don't even want to be on Twitter, and I'm nice. Can you imagine being Westboro Baptist Church on Twitter? Like, oh my goodness. So she would post like snarky memes and pictures of their terrible signs and like press release stuff. We're going to be doing a protest on this day at this time at this intersection, like that kind of thing. And like, replying to people. And naturally, 99% of what Megan got back was hate. But a few people did better. A few people asked her questions. Now, she was ready for the frequently asked questions. She'd already been through her like apologetics training, like, how could Christians say things that are so mean? Like, she was ready for that. The smart people, and some of them were not Christians, would ask her questions that exposed contradictions between the Bible and their behavior. Because Westboro Baptist Church believes in the Bible. They interpret it radically differently than I do. But they actually believe that they are the only church in the world that truly believes in the entire Bible. That's where they're coming from. So people would ask okay, so help me understand. The Bible says love your enemies. And you guys say that you're praying for soldiers to die. How does that work? And she'd be like, oh, I don't know. So she'd go to her mom. Mom, this guy on Twitter said this, that kind of thing. And she later said that her mom's responses to some of those questions were so lame that she became increasingly horrified that maybe she might have some internally contradictory beliefs. And then some of the people from Twitter start going out and meeting her at protests to talk in person because they're posting, hey, we're going to be here at this time and date doing a protest. So people would bring gifts and hey, Megan, it's me from Twitter. And they'd talk in person and face to face. And she ultimately, over a period of time, changes her entire worldview. She ends up coming to believe that she had believed some internally contradictory things, like probably all of us do. We just don't realize it. So it's like I was believing things that I wasn't thinking about them at the same time. So I didn't realize it. So she changed her worldview. She left that cult, was being basically kicked out of the family. Most of that family will not talk to her. Only the other family members who've also left that cult will talk to her. But she ultimately stayed in touch with those people from Twitter. She ultimately married one of them. She gave an amazing TED Talk. Look it up. She wrote a book. She's done some great interviews on Sam Harris's podcast. Sam Harris hilariously said that Megan Phelps Roper is proof that at least one good thing has ever happened on Twitter. I agree with that. Let me tell you one more story. Let me tell you about one of my heroes. This is Daryl Davis. Daryl Davis is an amazing blues pianist. Like I am a good musician. I turned down a professional music career to do pro-life work instead. I will never be able to do what Daryl Davis can do at a piano. It's amazing. He played with Chuck Berry, the Johnny B. Good guy. Kids, there's this movie Back to the Future. Is a big rock song in that. Anyway, so that's not why he's famous, even though he's amazing at that. He's famous for befriending members of the KKK and seeing them come out of the KKK like that. And it didn't start for him as a conversion thing. That's not what his goal was. He just wanted to ask racists this question, even from a child. He wanted to ask racists the question, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? So he has this brilliant strategy. He has his white female assistant cold call these guys, including like state leaders of KKK chapters, and just be like, my boss would love to treat you to lunch. And these guys just make an assumption about who they're going to meet. Because in their mind, in their backwards worldview, what white woman would work for a black guy? Like that's where they're coming from. So they make an assumption and they show up and Daryl's waiting for them at the booth. Hello, welcome, have a seat. And about half of them leave and about half of them stay out of courtesy. And they start to talk and he starts asking them questions. He'll eventually invite them to see his band play at a blues bar. Here's the thing. When you see a black man play the piano the way Daryl Davis can, it's really hard to remain a racist. So people start leaving the KKK and giving him their old robes and hoods. He has over 200 of them. Here's the point. Many people think of certain people as being like, they will never change their mind. They will never become pro-life. They're too hardened, they're too extreme, whatever. So if the example of the Apostle Paul is not enough, then let me just humbly submit that if someone who grew up being indoctrinated in the cult of Westboro Baptist Church can change, and if state leaders of the KKK can change, there is no one on this planet that can't change their mind about something. So here's why you should do this quickly. Pragmatic argument. This is the obvious one. You will have a greater impact on your friends than the people that you intellectually spar with on Facebook. I think you want to have a great impact. I've been talking to some of you. It seems like you all chose to be here. You want to have a great impact. So if you want to do that, you're just going to have a greater impact with your friends. I think there are some people who will never become pro-life because of one conversation. I think instead it's going to end up being a series of conversations with someone that they can tell is thoughtful, like you're not just saying like a bunch of stupid things, and more importantly, virtuous. Like you're not pro-life because you hate women or something like that. And those two things make a powerful chord. And that means that then the things that you say are going to have more weight for them. As my friend Jim Henderson once said, when people like each other, the rules change. But it's really important to me that you also hear the principled argument for doing this, which is that it is just good in and of itself to love people. It is good in and of itself to love people. I'm going to tell you my favorite definition of love. It's an amalgamation of a definition from Joseph Pieper and Jason Lepid-Jarvie, but this is awesome. Love says that it's good that you exist. And insofar as I am able, I will contribute to your happiness, your existence, your flourishing. Love says that it's good that you exist. And insofar as I am able, I will contribute to your happiness, your existence, your flourishing. That's what I mean when I say I love Deanna or Ronnie. I want them to flourish. I want them to be happy. So I'm going to give you 7 practical tips real quick, and then we're going to take some questions that I think have maybe been being sent in, but let me give you 7 tips. Avoid long Facebook debates. Please, or whatever social media app you're debating things on. Just don't. Everyone is virtue signaling, so no one feels emotionally safe on Facebook. And then everyone else piles on. This is not the place. You might find your pro-choice friend that you're going to talk to on Facebook or something like that. But as soon as possible, move it to one-on-one. Move it to like a digital thing or, like a one-on-one kind of a situation, or like ideally best thing, I would say coffee. If you can get in person, if they're local, they get like more points than me. But, but Zoom is at least, better than nothing. But avoid long Facebook debates. Don't think of this as a war. Daniel Cohen gave a great TED Talk where he said, if argument equals war, then learning equals losing. Oh, that's so good. I'm going to say it again. If argument equals war, then learning equals losing. I think of these as dialogues, not debates. We are standing shoulder to shoulder, staring at a problem together, whether it's abortion or something else. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to, hopefully by the end of this process, the two of us together cumulatively will have more true beliefs and fewer false ones. That's the goal. And we will do that journey together. Find genuine common ground, especially common values, as often as possible. There was a really interesting study on persuasion that Stanford did. We did a whole podcast about it a long time ago that you could find if you look up our podcast. But I'll just tell you my main takeaway from it is the pro-choice person you're talking to, the more in common that you have with them, especially at a values level, not just issues, but values level, the more in common you have, the easier it will be on average, all other things being equal, for you to change their mind. Because it is easier for them to picture themselves being like you. So the more in common you have. So I have some conservative views. I have some kind of libertarian views. I have some pretty liberal views. And I am happy to get into my more liberal beliefs that I have when I'm on a college campus talking with people, just if nothing else, because I'm trying to signal to them that I'm not just Ben Shapiro with a beard. I agree with some things Ben Shapiro says, and I disagree with some other things that he says. Fine, I'm different. Eventually, they can tell that, and then they're intrigued by me. Then they're asking me why I'm pro-life. Especially when they figure that I can make a better pro-choice argument than they can. They're like, how did you come to this position? If you agree with me on like this and this, what? It's like, I'm happy to explain. Don't think of the other person as your project. It's really easy to fall into this, to thinking of people as like a potential notch on your belt, but that's objectifying someone, and it ignores the principled reason for doing this, which is that it's intrinsically good in and of itself to love people. Seek balance in your conversations. Don't just debate issues. Sometimes when pro-life and pro-choice people are friends, they're always we're always going to talk about this. That's not what friends do. We're not talking about just hanging out always to talk about issues. We're talking about genuine friendship. And it would be weird for friends to always debate an issue. That's not what friends do. Christians do this a lot when they have a gay friend. A lot of Christians do this when they have a gay friend. They feel like every time they're around this person, if they don't find some sneaky, subtle way to sneak in some kind of, here's what I think about gay marriage, then they're betraying God or something like that. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. They know. Calm down. It's okay. Sometimes just hang out. Just love them like you would anyone else. That friends don't talk about their sexuality every time either. That's weird. Don't be weird. That's weird. Seek balance in your conversations. Thoroughly understand their view. You need to understand their view so well that you can help them understand why it's wrong in the way that they can understand. You need to understand their view so well you can show them why it's wrong in a way that they can hear and understand. That's my main takeaway from Megan Phelps Roper's story. Is the really smart people, she needed Bible verses for her to see what she needed to see. And finally, and this is the hardest one for a lot of people, guys, but allow them to remain unconvinced. Most people change their mind very slowly. As an apologist, but my friend Jonathan Fincher says people change their mind very slowly the way water changes the contours of a rock. I love that picture. That is the way people usually change their minds. So we need to guard our hearts when we have conversations about important things and they don't change their mind on the spot. And then like you might be feeling like a failure or something like that. Like, no, 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 no. That's normal. You should not expect people to change their mind in one day. You wouldn't either. Allow them to remain unconvinced. So we're going to take questions in a second, but as Michelle gets up to, or is going to help facilitate that with a microphone and a phone and everything, I would just want to like ask you, imagine what would happen for a moment if all the pro-lifers in your city did this. Like imagine if this became the pro-life thing. Your city would change. It would take a long time. And it would be messy because people are messy creatures. But I think it would be an amazing way to let God work through you. Thank you. I'll take your questions. Sure. Sure. I can hang out here.
Sure.
Or you want to do this? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You
I'll just hang out here. It's hot here.
Yeah, it's fine.
No, this is stupid. You are not dressed the way I am, so I'm just gonna.
Sure. Okay, so there is a phone number up on the screen. And if you have a question, we would love to hear it. So break out your phones. I didn't give you this number earlier because we had kind of agreed ahead of time. We didn't want the phones out necessarily throughout. But when you have a question, send it my way, and then we'll have Josh answer it. And if we don't have any questions, then I guess we'll just sit here quietly.
Your favorite dad joke?
Oh, my favorite. A good dad joke happens spontaneously. A good dad joke is a really bad pun that happens based on the thing that's happening. Okay, I'll tell. Actually, I do have a good answer to this. This is a good dad joke. I helped Georgia Right to Life. I was at Georgia Right to Life on staff for several years in kind of the beginning of my pro-life career. And so we would do the state March for Life thing in January at the Georgia Capitol. So we'd have like 5,000 people. We'd have like buglers along the way doing taps. It was pretty cool. So I'd help kind of arrange that. And this one year we had a flash flood. No one expected it. It was just a deluge. It was crazy. Like everyone's shoes were ruined. People's cell phones were ruined. It was so wet. And someone funnier than me said that this year the March for Life was literally Roe versus Wade.
That's good, right? Round of applause.
Come on. That's good. That's a dad joke right there. Some dad said that. I wasn't a dad at the time, so I didn't come up with it, but.
All right, we do have a few questions.
Okay, let's do it.
So first, what do we do if we encounter the media at the March for Life? Like, for example, they come up to you and they want to interview you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it would be ideal if you're open to talking to the media, prepare ahead of time, like at least a couple of sentences that you can say, like, why are you pro-life? Why are you here? And kind of rehearse that a little bit. And think about like how you can explain to them that you are here because we care about children, we care about equality, we care about human rights. We believe that this is a human rights issue, and so we are here. And we are here because we care about women, and we want to help them, and we want to help America become a place where abortion happens is an unthinkable thing and not something that people need to do. And so we as a pro-life movement are working, like, at this point, I'm just on a soapbox, but like, think ahead of time about how you could explain to people who are not pro-life why you are here, what you are doing, what you are trying to get out of this or something like that, and be ready for those conversations and be ready. But I'll tell you, they won't always go toward, like, the media won't always go for you if you are looking all nice. Like, I've seen, like, you know, if we're hanging out looking all nice, the media doesn't come to us. They come to, like, the guy pushing the cart full of, like, MAGA, like, flags and banners and things like that. Like, they're not always talking to us, but if they talk to you, then great.
Now, speaking of talking
Yeah.
and conversations, what if you have a friend who's been pro-choice for a long time? How do you start the conversation?
Oh, that's a great question. So one thing that you could do is you could use this trip as kind of the launching pad and say, you could reach out to them and say something along these lines. It needs to be true for you, but it could be something as simple as, hey, so I heard this speaker and he was talking about having friends who are different from me, and I felt challenged. I, like, you know, we all live in confirmation bias land, okay? Like, all of us live to some extent in confirmation bias is an informal logical fallacy. It's when you go only to sources that are already going to agree with you. So if you're a liberal and you only watch MSNBC, you live in confirmation bias land. If you're conservative and you only listen to Ben Shapiro or Rush Limbaugh, you live in confirmation bias land. Sorry, confirmation bias land. And so you don't want to do that. You want to be thoughtfully engaging with both sides and then able to have better conversations with people. So you can say, I want to change. I want to be in less confirmation bias. I want to spend more time learning from my pro-choice friends why they're pro-choice. So I would just love, can I buy you coffee? I would love to just hear from you. I know that there are a lot of feelings that pro-choice have about pro-life people, and I get it. There are probably, I agree with some of them more than you might expect, assuming that's true. Like if you've got common ground ready, like common ground ready to go. Say, and I would love to hear from you. And if you want, you know, me to respond or me to say, I'm happy to share with you my thoughts. But if nothing else, I would just love to learn from you and hear from you and have you know, the honor of getting a chance to talk to someone different from me about this. And I'm not going to interrupt. I'm here just to hear from you. Like, something like that is the kind of thing that if I'm on the other side, I feel like I really want to respond to that. Like, that seems like that could be an amazing set of conversations. Something like that would be one way that you could potentially do it.
All right. We know you've had a lot of success, a lot of people who have asked good questions and some that have actually become pro-life. Have you ever met someone after you talked to them, they became pro-choice? So
Yes. Yes, there is. There's someone that I made more pro-choice one time. I was at Aquinas College. This is one of my favorite stories anyway. I'm just like so glad someone teed this up for me. We were at Aquinas College in Michigan, Catholic University. We've got our poll table set up which said, you know, should abortion remain legal at the time? And we had like yes, no, and it depends. And people are coming up, and this woman comes up, and she started the conversation super chill, calm, cool, and collected. It's like, why do you want to control women's bodies? It's like that kind of thing. And it's like, oh my gosh. It's like, oh, okay. And I was like, okay, I promise I will answer that question, but can I ask you a few questions first? I love finding common ground with people. And she's like, fine. It's like, okay, you know. Do you think that abortion should be legal through all 9 months or something less than that? She's like, oh, I think like 20 weeks. People have been talking about 20 weeks. People have been drawing doing these state bills. That seems to make sense to me. It's like, okay. Are there any reasons why you think women should not be allowed to have abortions? And she's like, well, I'm against birth control abortions. She is the only pro-choice person I've ever heard use that phrase. That's a very pro-life-y, like, propaganda phrase. But like, seriously, I'm against birth control abortions. But like, if If, of course, if she's poor, if she's been raped or something like that, then of course I support that. I'm like, okay, like what if it's a sex selection abortion? I said, like there are some cultures that like value a boy so much that when they have the ultrasound, if they find out that it's a girl, sometimes they will abort girls, even in America, just for that reason, so that they can start over and try again, at least for the first child to be a son. Like, would you support? She's like, oh, no, I'm against that. I said, okay, let me ask one more question. I said, I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm just curious. Why do you want to control women's bodies? And she said, what? And I said, oh, because you said that you don't think that women should be allowed to have abortions after 20 weeks. You don't think that they should be allowed to have sex selection abortions, flippant abortions. And I agree with you about those things, but why do you want to control women's bodies? And she's like, I don't think I do. I was like, I don't feel like I do either. I think it's more complicated. Can we go past the bumper sticker slogans? Like, I want to get to know you, the person, like that kind of thing. And she was kind of like, she kind of smiled and just kind of calmed down. And she's like, okay. And she's like, I just feel like women should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies. And I was like, hey, that's a common view. I hear you. I think the problem is that your view disagrees with itself. And she said, what? And I said, well, because if the way that you ground the reason for being pro-choice is to say that a woman should be able to do whatever she wants with anything inside of her body, then you can't say that she shouldn't be allowed to do, you might not have a post-20-week abortion, but some other women will and do. And some other women would choose an elective sex selection abortion. And so that doesn't work if the way you're grounding this is by saying she can do whatever she wants. Now, at this point, the pro-choice person has two typical options. They either jump to a personhood argument or I don't think it's a person anyway. I'm happy to talk to them about that. Look up our YouTube channel, the Equal Rights Argument. It's like a 9-minute kind of PragerU video. I'll show you how to respond to that. Or they might make a better bodily autonomy argument. They might go all violinist on you, but that's not what she did. She did choice 3. It's like I could see the light bulb go on over her head. She's like, I think you're right. I shouldn't be against any of the abortions. Well, I've got to go to class. Goodbye. And she left. I'm like, wait, I wasn't finished. And Jacob on our team was watching this, and he was like, wait a minute. Did you just make her more pro-choice? That's the worst conversation I've ever seen in my life. He got all animated and funny like Jacob does. And the conversation that our staff had in the rental van away from campus to our host home, the conversation topic our staff had was whether or not she was better off or worse off for having met me. And here's the point. We had decided she was better off, and here's why. She walked up to that table with an inconsistent, comfortable pro-choice position. She had to walk away from the table with a consistent, uncomfortable pro-choice position. And I want to drive the comfortable pro-choice position extinct. If you're going to have a position, you should be willing to bite your bullets. And so if she needed to bite those bullets and walk away being like, oh my gosh, I had to say that every abortion is fine. That's not good. Like that kind of, that's going to be an important part of her process. So yes, I have made someone more pro-choice, but I think she probably needed that part of her process in order to hopefully turn around. I'll sit back down now.
So a question that's similar, but more specific. So when you speak to someone who's pro-choice and she uses the terms or the phrase, my body, my choice, is it even worth responding?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, this is great territory. This is half the abortion debate, y'all. Look, there are two big disagreements between pro-life and pro-choice people. There's not dozens. We don't disagree about whether poverty is a bad thing or whether rape is a bad thing. There are two big disagreements. One of them has to do with fetal personhood. What is the moral status of the unborn, philosophically speaking? This is more of a philosophical question than a scientific question. The other pillar has to do with bodily autonomy, which completely goes around this thing. This thing basically says that even if it is a person, even if you're all right, that is just like you and me morally, just younger, that she should still have the right to have an abortion because she should not be forced by the government, by the laws, to be that restricted in what she does with her body. That's half the, I actually think this is the reason why most people are pro-choice. I think this is more foundational to a lot of pro-choice beliefs than personhood. It doesn't mean that most pro-choice people think it's a person. They don't. They usually think both things at the same time. They think it's not a person, but even if you change their mind about that with the equal rights argument that you're going to watch on our YouTube channel, they're not worried about it because they have a bodily rights safety net underneath that they can fall into, that pro-lifers are not usually very good at responding to. If you want to get good at responding to them, you should go to equalrightsinstitute.com/bodily rights. It's a landing page with pointing to a bunch of our best videos and articles and podcasts about it, equalrightsinstitute.com/bodily rights. And we give you, here's a bunch of ways to respond. But like, my body, my choice, the tricky thing about the phrase my body, my choice is like, that's just a slogan. That can mean at least 4 different arguments. And I don't know what it is. So like, I need to learn more. I'm going to need to start by asking a clarification question. Like you said, my body, my choice. Help me understand. Like, can you flesh that out for me? Like, tell me more. What did you mean when you said that? And if they need, I can give them multiple choice. I can help them out. It's not a fair fight anyway. I've been thinking about this professionally for like 20 years. Like, this is not a fair fight. Like, it's fine. I'm just like, I am here just like, I'm like, we're on a journey for truth together. So I will help give you the great arguments. I will dig my own grave deeper because it's like way better when you gracefully get out of it. So I'll be like, okay, you by my body, my choice, you could have meant that it's not a person because it's in her body, like because it's dependent on her body. You might be saying that it's like a part of her body. A lot of times people mean like an organ. You might mean that she should have the right to do whatever she wants with anything inside of her body. Or maybe you just think that she should have the right to refuse to have her body used as a life support machine for 9 months, like something like that. Like, all of those things can be meant by my body, my choice. How I don't want, it's not about what the last person meant. I want to know what you meant. What did you mean when you said that? Like, help me understand. And then we go from there. And there's clarification questions that we often ask, and we're often going to like talk about certain things, and you can find them on our website and everything. But we will take, I don't know, we're taking do we have time for another question?
We do not.
Oh,
But-
okay. Oh.
Okay, so here's the thing. I have a record of all your questions, and I'm going to forward them to Josh so that he can be ready, not only to speak about it on a podcast, but you're going to be with us throughout the weekend on and off, correct? No.
Yes, I'm going to be here sometime. Ellen on our team, who's amazing. She's the one with the blue hair that matches our colors. She's going to be here the entire time. I will be here sometimes, and sometimes not. But we are always there to answer questions and all that.
So on and off. So if you see him back there, like beeline,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
also, we do have a meet and greet scheduled after this for our YA students. YA again is age 20 to 35. So if you are in that age bracket, please feel free. It will be in the Crystal Ballroom. All right. In addition, if you guys have asked him enough questions, he has agreed to stay for the college reception as well for the college students. I'm sorry, high school students, but that just means you have to be like #1 in here when he's in here, right back at that table, right? But if they have a question they want to ask you personally, is there a good way they can contact you?
Yeah, if nothing else, you can contact us through the website, but I think we'll be around enough, or you can talk. I mean, Ellen also knows a lot of the answers to a lot of these questions. She's read every article. She's listened to every podcast. She kind of grew up as an ERI fan person. So I mean, she actually might have the answers to your questions, but if not, I will be around. You can contact us through the website. We're happy to
Can you tell us what the website is?
Equalrightsinstitute.com. We started the Equal Rights Institute because we wanted to teach the equal rights argument.
Let's give Josh Brahm a warm thank you.